Hello, this is TurboDoc702 for RPG Limit Break Submissions. This is Domina. This is an interesting little indie game that got put together recently and just recently got released. It is a sim strategy RPG game, I guess you would call it, in which you play the manager of a stable of gladiators in Rome. You are supposed to train them for battle, and the battles in general take place using computer-generated AI. You could technically use an ability that allows you to control one gladiator, but it isn't necessarily faster than just letting them fight it out on their own as long as you train them appropriately. The category that I'm going to be showing here is the any percent good ending run. This category has gone through some pretty heavy overhauls since its inception, which I'll get into. I actually am going to go back here for just a moment in the video to show something interesting about this game that might be a draw for marathon stuff. So, interesting thing about Domina is that it has Twitch integration. In the middle of the screen, you'll see that it has the Twitch icon. It has enabled. It has channel name. And what's interesting about this integration is it allows gladiator names to be generated from chats. It can be set to subscriber only. Chat votes on events, which we wouldn't want to do for a speedrun because it would just eat too much time. You can also cheer during battle, so like you'll hear people from the chat say like, cheer or boo appropriately inside of there. So just some real quick thoughts. We could definitely do this for chat. I have no idea. I'd have to talk to the developer on how it deals with profanity inside of names. If we did subs only, that is somewhat of a buffer to that, although people could buy in to kind of cause issues. Another option we could have is we could maybe have a bunch of people from RPG Limit Break actually be in an alternate channel, and then we can draw names from that channel instead. Or another thing that I could do is maybe try and get in touch with the developer and see if there's a place where gladiator names are in-game and just literally swap the names for different personalities in the community as well. And I think that could be a fun little thing to do. Other than that, we're going to be getting into this proper. Now, I do want to preface this in that I feel like I want to maybe not necessarily do any percent good ending. Right now, we don't have a good solution for a more expansive category, but we're working on it. But we're just going to show you good ending normal, and then I'll kind of talk about options later. So do stick with it. So the beginning of this is very, very fast. A lot of menuing inside of this. Basically, we're hiring 3 employees: the architect, the fabber, and the sacerdos. And those are going to be the only 3 employees we have. We're going to have these guys learn their upgrades as quickly as possible. We are going to be getting rid of both our slave and our second gladiator, selling them off for a little bit of extra money. And we're going to start our final gladiator starting with strength training immediately. We're turning on automatic training so that he automatically trains strength as much as possible. We are buying the favor of the legate with wine so that he can patron our gladiator. So now he pays for his expenses, his water, food, wine, all that stuff. Water and food are kind of important for allowing yourself to manage this gladiator or this single gladiator at this point. We pick these 3 employees because we're going to use the architect to use collecting stones, which will improve our strength increase, train speed. We pick Sacerdos because randomly, every few days, he will grant a random bonus to your gladiator in the form of a stat boost. And we're choosing the favor because the favor will automatically upgrade a piece of a gladiator's gear. We'll kind of get into that more as we do. The Doctora on the left side causes automatic training for your gladiators. You gain no benefit from not having him. He also researches a perk tree. In that perk tree, we are trying to rush damage and a perk called Attack Vector, which increases our attack speed substantially. And that guy's just going to permanently train strength for now. There is some cause to maybe have him do weapon strength training, as we've seen that the damage raise from that is substantial. But in the current route, all we're doing is strength training. Strength training increases the damage you deal and increases your HP. So that's really important just to be able to survive initial exchanges with other gladiators, because fights go blazingly fast. We're gonna we're going to upgrade some very cheap things on our gladiator, including his weapon and his greaves. The reason for that is we have automatic upgrades on the Faber in the top left. He's like a blacksmith. And as mentioned, he will randomly pick a piece of gear on a random gladiator and improve it to the next level up. However, since we only have one gladiator, he actually just keeps funneling his increases into that single gladiator. Same thing for the Sacrados. Normally he would give his improvements to different gladiators, but since we only have one, it funnels everything into this one guy. Now, this is a very kind of bold strategy. The much, much more conservative thing would be to take two gladiators, which you can still do pretty easily. The reason for that is this strategy is vulnerable to space disease, is what I call it. We get rid of the architect and hire the bard here. The reason for that is the architect is the only one of the employees that when they build something, it stays when you fire them. So we build two gather stones so that our strength training increases, and baths, which increases our recovery time and morale. After we get those things, we dump for the bard, who gives, again, increased training bonuses and also raises morale. Morale is important because the happier gladiators are, the faster they train and the higher base stats they will get as well. We are going to be moving forward inside of this game. In the top right, you kind of see one of the main mechanics in this. We have 335 days to get ourselves ready for the championship. Each day takes between 5 and 6 seconds at the fastest. And time only passes when you're on this screen. If you enter sub-screens, then it pauses. So you want to spend the least time menuing possible, which is where kind of the speed increase comes from this game. So it is somewhat of an auto-scroller, but there are things that you can do in order to speed yourself up. And you want to stay as active as possible while still maintaining the power of your gladiators. And that's the real kind of like the real thrust of this run and what makes it interesting. So you will notice that we've been doing our upgrades, but we've also had a big red screen like that comes up, and we've been declining it. That is actually fights inside of it. So originally we used to take pretty much every fight that we could in order to raise power for the gladiators. However, with this new strategy that's centered around 1 or 2 gladiators, we no longer need to take fights, really. And this is kind of one of the brutal things about how this category is developed, is that now the only things we do are what are called regionals. Regionals are a group of 9 different fights that are predetermined that you can choose to take part in. Of those 9, 2 of them require you to have certain favor with the officials, that being the legate and the magistrate, which are on the bottom left and bottom right. Since we constantly decline normal scheduled fights, they are constantly mad at us. Funny enough, they are so mad at us that the legate will continue to continue his patronage of our gladiator, even though he hates our guts. He'll still give him food. But at this point, we only do the regionals in order to gain power, and after we do the regionals, then we just kind of wait out until the championship. So I spoke about space disease before. So it's space disease and SNCC. So if SNCC bits you, your run's over with this particular setup. There is a random event, or random events happen at different intervals inside of Domina. Some of them don't really do much. Some of them are backbreaking. For example, there are times where it'll be like, the magistrate wants to borrow your gladiator for an exhibition, and if you say no, he might execute him. If you send him, he might die in the exhibition because the other gladiator was salty for some reason. Your guys might train and get sunstroke, and if they get sunstroke, maybe they'll recover, maybe they'll just die. The worst one, though, is the one that is completely non-interactive, which is the snake, or the SNCC. SNCC is brutal because it's literally just like, there's a poisonous snake in your ludus. It bit one of your gladiators. They're dead. And normally that wouldn't be too bad, because normally you have this huge stable of gladiators, so it's like, what's the chances it bites your 3 best guys, right? Well, if you have 1 or 2 gladiators, that snake's biting a good guy. And they are going to die, 100%. So it's rough. there are things that can go wrong with the single gladiator strategy, even though it is the fastest. Two gladiator strategy helps out with this. Your progression is a little bit slower based on that, but you do get some type of immunity to having to deal with, various types of space disease and snakes coming your way. So we're going to be burning some time going inside of this, because this is a large portion of the run as it stands right now. Just waiting for increases, increasing your gladiator's morale, just training him up, getting the appropriate perks, and just kind of maintaining your food and water supply so that they continue on. There are special things called Jupiter's Blessings. Jupiter's Blessings can be equipped on the gladiators to do various buffs. Like, for example, there's ones that increase the speed of your attacks. There's ones that increase your attack damage. There's ones that make it so your gladiator doesn't need food and water. There's also ones you can put on the trainers so that they take less resources in order to set up. So lots of things that can happen with Jupiter's Blessings. You're not really seeing them right now because you obtain Jupiter's Blessings from fighting, and we're not fighting. You get one at the beginning of the game that is randomly selected. The one that I had gotten, I had checked, and it wasn't anything important, so I'm not equipping it. Let's see here. Other things to cover. I guess since we have some downtime here, before kind of the next set of events happens, I can kind of talk about the development of the route. So originally, our routing involved taking 2 gladiators and making them strong and taking them into the 1- and 2-man regionals. Then later on, we would pick up a 3rd, a 4th, and a 5th gladiator so that we had this nice little stable of gladiators that all fought, and they took every single fight that the magistrate and legate had given them, with a couple of exceptions. Again, at some point, I was like, you know what? I wonder if we could just do this with 1 or 2 gladiators and not do any of the fights. Funny enough, there was a viewer of mine called the Spy Crab, or Spy Crab, that had the same idea, and he tested it maybe 2 days before I was going to, and he was like, yep, this works, and it's totally broken. And Spy Crab has actually been pretty instrumental in testing some of the kind of unknown things inside the category. Like, for example, we used to get a upgrade from the architect called the Palace, because it increased your training speed. That's what it said on the tooltip. Increases your training speed. Turns out it only increases your training speed for weapons. So, like, kind of verification and testing is a big thing that he's contributed with quite a bit. So, the legate is of some importance inside of this run. Right now, we are at 268 days left. Once we reach about the 150-day mark, the legate's troops that he can recruit to you are much better than they were at the beginning of the game. They have better gear, they're higher level, they cost less money to kind of get in fighting shape. Once you hit less than 100 days, it's possible for you to spend 1,000 to 1,200 gold, or coins rather, to get a fully decked out gear-wise gladiator from the legate. That'll be pretty strong. So what's nice is that you can use the legate to get access to gladiators to kind of fill out your ranks in the late game, if you need to, or to replace gladiators that have fallen in combat. The reason we buy them from the legate and not from the magistrate is the magistrate will sell slaves who have pretty good stats, but they come with no real gear, so you would have to buy in all of their gear. In addition to that, there is a statistic called Meditate, which is your AI strength, or AI skill, as the game calls it. And it's ranked from 1 to 100. It takes a long time to raise AI skill, but the legate, if you purchase his former soldiers as your gladiators, they always come with 100 AI skill. So whenever we recruit, we're going to be recruiting from the legate unless we need just some kind of emergency bodies. Then we might purchase 1 or 2 from the magistrate, but that's rather uncommon, I would say. Not rare, but uncommon. Returning to the prospect of how this route's developed a little bit. So once we discovered that you didn't need to do any of the regionals, it was really a matter of tinkering with layouts. Spy Crab proposed a double gladiator layout and holding off on doing regionals until much later in the game. My original proposal was having one gladiator and doing the regionals earlier. And the reason for that is if you got a good Jupiter's Blessing off of a regional, it could streamline your training significantly and make your guy much stronger and kind of set yourself up for the late game much better. This particular run where I got this PB was a mix of the two. I went single gladiator, but I decided to hold off on the regionals for a very long time. Basically until I was at the point where I had to do regionals or I was going to run out of food and water. Now, even though we're training the one gladiator, we do have the good ending portion of this category. So the way good ending works is at the end of the game, there is a fight in a rebellion. And in the rebellion, you will get helped by gladiators you have chosen to grant freedom. So if you have been not granting freedom to any gladiators, or only granting freedom to gladiators who are terrible, you will die in the rebellion. Because the rebellion guys they're not super strong, but they're strong enough to take down grunts. So our goal here is to train up 2 gladiators at least. The first gladiator is going to be getting us through most of our regionals, and once he does so, he's going to get released. We are then going to purchase a second gladiator from the legate, and then take that gladiator through the last few regionals, and have him command our troops into the endgame for the championship. So the first gladiator that we train, we're going to release to help us in the rebellion. The second gladiator is going to be the captain of our team, so to speak, for the championship. And then we're hoping that between the first gladiator that we have and maybe a couple of slaves that we free along the way to draw some fire, that Domina survives. And so far, this seems like a really, really solid tactic for dealing with both the championship and the rebellion. Once we get access to our second gladiator, we are going to try to bribe one of the other officials with wine and patron that gladiator as well. Another approach to picking up the second gladiator is maybe you don't wait until 80 days left. I think for this one, and a slightly better option, is once the Faber has completely upgraded one of your gladiators, you should buy into a second one. And the reason for that is the second one will then start training up, but they will also get all of the upgrades from the Faber. So you won't be wasting the Faber's upgrades. So that's another approach to it. So the mixing of these two strategies, the double gladiator strategy and the single gladiator, led to this run. I think if I did this for a marathon, I'd run the double gladiator strategy, because I think that hedges against catastrophes happening much better. But I'm looking into refining the route maybe a little bit more if it gets selected for RPG Limit Break. The other thing is looking into perhaps changing the category. As you can see, we're skipping a lot of these random fights. One of the suggestions that was made was all fights. And what that would mean is whenever you are sent into a fight, you have to take it. I think this runs into significant problems, namely a couple things. Number one, what happens if you lose? Are you considered to have done the fight? That would mean that you're setting it to all victories, not just all fights. Otherwise, you could just send slaves in to die, and you wouldn't lose anything of value. So if we go for all victories, then we run into the problem of things just randomly going wrong in a fight that's difficult or at level for your guys. The types of fights that you can engage in are 1v1s, many v many, which could be like 3v3s, 5v5s, and gauntlets. A gauntlet is a 3v3 to a 5v5 match. And what happens is one guy goes out, the other guy goes out, you guys fight to the death, then the next guy of the losing team comes out. So it's like 1v1, then the winner of that goes on to fight the next guy on their team. So the problem with this is that the game will automatically sort gladiators that you have from your weakest to your strongest. So what happens typically in a gauntlet scenario is they're complete bloodbaths. Like you end up losing 2 to 3 gladiators, if not more, just because of the format and how difficult it is for single gladiators to survive in it. So they're brutal affairs, and getting a gauntlet could be a surefire way to losing your run in a all victories style run, especially for marathons. That being said, fights are super hype in Domina. Like, I'm probably gonna show bits and pieces of what the original run looked like, just so that you can get an idea of where this route came from. Because I think this game is super hype back then, and I think with the right format and the right category, it could be again. I will be submitting Domina any percent good ending as around a 45-minute run. I will try to submit a question mark or whatever alternate category at the 1 hour 10-minute mark. And that would be like whatever we can kind of put together. But I think the combination of Twitch integration really helps out with that. So, that's kind of where this game came from. And where it's headed, we'll just have to see. Other routing changes that I've considered is not so much for marathons, but I've also considered maybe doing something like doing only 3 regionals and seeing if I'm still powerful enough to finish the game, which I'm beginning to think I might be. Another thing you could... So, like, another quick fix that people have talked about was, like, all regionals. Like, there's those other 2 regionals that you don't do because you don't have favor with the legislate or the legate and the magistrate. So, like, why don't you just do all of those? Then you need to maintain your standing with the legate and the magistrate. You know, like, then you can't just deny all their fights, right? Well, not really, because you can still deny all of their fights. You would just pool wine, and when you pool wine, you could just bribe them until they're happy with you and then go to the regionals. So you don't really fix anything there either. So, like, there's no great solutions to this, and out of all of them, all victories is maybe the best, which is a little bit unfortunate if you pull something like gauntlets, but it might be the only way to kind of set Domina speedrunning back on that hype train that it was on for a little bit. So you're also seeing me kind of navigate my way through random events. There is a best thing that you can do in random events at any given time, or one that will hedge your bets towards the best possible outcome. But for this run, I wasn't doing any of that. Again, because we're doing purely speedrun. I am just like pianoing buttons. I'll cover that in a sec, though. This is our first regional, and this is what fights look like in Domina, really. And it's just 2 big, beefy, armored gladiators, and they just rush and just maul each other. And it is pretty fast. This one maybe isn't going to be as fast because my guy is still, like, training up. But as you can see, like, it's not that the AI plays badly either, so getting mind control to control your own gladiator wouldn't necessarily equate to having a faster run. And when you get victories, you get coins, food, all that good stuff. I got a Jupiter's Blessing of ×2 production. That Jupiter Blessing is useless to us. So, yeah. So we're going to go ahead and do our second of the regionals. So we're doing this in order to get enough money to be able to buy another gladiator. Our first gladiator has already gotten all of his improvements, so now we want to get a second one so that he can improve as well. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to use our first gladiator to what I call squire in our second gladiator. And how that works is after the first 3 regionals, there are a series of regionals that are 2v2s, a 4v4, and a 4v1 in your favor. So what we're doing here is we are using the first gladiator to take the second gladiator to the regionals that are 2v2s so that they get stronger. And once they get stronger, then they will lead our troops to victory once again. Kind of revisiting that concept. We don't want to do this too early because we don't want to keep doing regionals, because regionals will give us additional gladiators and slaves, and we'll have to provide for them with water or food, or spend the menuing time to be able to get rid of them. I do apologize about that. It appears my alarm has gone off. But yeah. So you'll see like the plus mark going over the person that I had just purchased. That's the Faber repairing his gear. Gear does need to be repaired after fights. However, if a piece of gear is bought or if it is upgraded, then it comes with full durability. So the repair isn't super relevant unless you need to buy gladiators late game and replace other ones. There is also the option to remove kind of profanity or clean up the language inside of the game. There is a lot of narration inside of this game, inside of combat and stuff. Some of it's pretty lewd, but you can clear that up inside of the options as well. Music in this game is fantastic. Unfortunately, I did not have a recording of this with just the stream audio. I only had one with my mic and probably a Discord chat. But if you are unfamiliar with Domina tracks, it's pretty good stuff there. Some pretty good ones. I might even take it off of mute when I show the original runs and how they kind of worked out. So we're closing in on 130 days left. And this run is obviously doing pretty well, just as a result of the change of strategies involved with it. I mentioned pianoing buttons for the random events. So in random events, right now, my strategy is to go on the numpad, or not on the numpad, but on the number row, I go 4, 3, 2, 1. And I just go, like, quickly plink over all the buttons. And the reason for that is typically the last option is the one that will give away the least from your character. The top options tend to give away something, and it's usually like give to the legate, give to the magistrate, give to everybody. And then the fourth one's give to nobody. There are variations of this, but in general, the fourth option and the third option are going to be your ones that take away the least from you. They tend to be dangerous options, or more dangerous, I should say, than the other options, but not so much that in a speedrun where we are just trying to go as quickly as possible, you aren't just quickly going over the best options possible. In a marathon, I probably would very quickly read over them and then make decisions based on that. So there we got access to some new gladiators via finishing the regional there, and we let them go. The reason we let them go is you do want a couple of extra bodies inside of the rebellion just to block for your character and to kind of support your main gladiator as well. Excuse me. So this is what I mean by squiring in. So Areolus is definitely way stronger than Brutus, so he can carry the fights, and Brutus just kind of sticks around so that he gets extra stat improvements. And I mean, you're seeing how fast these fights go now. And I mean, that's where the hype really comes from, is like fights are like start and end super quickly, and they could go really good for you or really bad. And then there's even some fights where even though they're done in less than 10 seconds, they're so like intense because of how close they are that like they're really enthralling, I think. I should mention that so far there is two glitches that I'm aware of inside of this game. They might have been patched out since this game has been getting relatively regular patches. The first of which is there is a glitch in which your gladiators can get stuck in walls. If that happens, then you're kind of screwed. But I'm hoping that'll get patched out relatively quickly. It was supposed to have been patched out, but I guess they ran into issues later on. This is me equipping some Jupiter Blessings. We got some stamina recovery and max stamina increase, which is kind of nice, but they're definitely not super great ones. Out of the Jupiter Blessings, you really want it's Curse of Something, which gives you 150% attack damage, but your character can't get over 50% health. There's ones that increase your attack damage, there's ones that increase your attack speed, and then there's ones that improve your weapon training and strength training speed, which by a lot, like 500% speed, which is a lot. Those are the ones we're really shooting for. But anything that increases damage or keeps our gladiators fighting is kind of nice. Speaking once again regarding... Ooh, what was I talking about? Oh man, it's all over. It's all gone. But yeah, just Jupiter's Blessings can be used to drastically alter the statistics or training speed of your guys, which helps out quite a bit. So, we're closing in on the last 100 days of the run. At this point, the Legate is now selling premium gladiators at 1,000 coins. We are trying to save approximately 1,000 coins for that reason. And that's just so that if one of our guys dies somehow or just gets completely destroyed, we can replace them. We have done 5 of the 7 regionals right now. We are going to save the last 2, which are the 4v4 and the 4v1, until we get our next batch of gladiators. So what we've done is Brutus has been squired in by Areolus, who we're going to let go. Brutus is then going to squire in 1 to 2 additional gladiators, and he's going to take those guys to the last 2 regionals to try and get them in fighting shape for the championship. And the combination of those 3 guys should be enough to help us to finish off the rest of the game. And what you really want, what you are desiring, is for when you pick up slaves or other gladiators from the regionals, you're going to release some of them and keep a scant few, perhaps, for the championship. And that's so that those guys will draw attacks that could have went on your strong guys onto them. So they act as secondary life bars, for lack of a better term, to your strong gladiators. Yeah. So, like, as I mentioned, one of the other improvements you would do is perhaps not just doing strength training. We might work out a threshold for strength that's good and then start weapon training, since that tends to do more damage overall. That being said, strength training is unique in that it really doesn't have a upper cap on the amount that you can gain. When you're talking about other statistics, you can have 100 AI and up to level 200 of the other stats. So there are caps based on that. It should be noted that warriors will only get improvements to their stats from participating in battles if they actually participate in the battle. Like, they have to deal damage. Which is something that had been kind of patched back in. I had the assumption that it was supposed to be that way, but for a couple patches that it just gave improvements to everybody. But that got patched out relatively quickly. All right. Just watching some guys do some squat thrusts for a good 30 minutes. It's all good. As you can see, the Faber is still ticking, still repairing gear, still gearing out our other 2 gladiators here. We're still saving those last two regionals, as mentioned, to Squire and guys. We're also saving them to hedge our bets against something terrible happening, like if Areolus or Brutus, if one of them just died right now, we need to keep the other one to help out whoever would be left. So it's just, this is all hedging for safety on random events going wrong at this point. Because we're pretty deep in the run at this point, we just want to make sure that we finish up. See, at this point now, I'm starting to kind of read a couple of the option trees, because again, this is fairly late in the game, and I want to just see... I want to see this run through, basically. I don't want to pick an option that could get my gladiators killed more easily if I can avoid it. Yeah, and at this point, I might buy food and water one more time. But my food and water amount is pretty good at this point. All right. Game features a strong female lead, by the way. Girl in the middle is the Domina, the leader of the Ludus, the manager of the gladiators. So we're going to be heading to our last two regionals with our 3 remaining gladiators. And this is a mini v mini. It's up to a 4v5, but right now we only have 3 gladiators, so it's a 3v5. However, the guys next to the big dude are total jobbers, so we're going to just chop them to bits. I mentioned the types of fights inside of this game. Mini v mini, 1v1, and Gauntlet. There is a modifier that can occur with certain fights, which is the Lion's Pit, which basically there are lions that can appear during fights, and they can break free and fight people as well. There's also giants that can appear. They're part usually of the regionals, but if you make them surrender, sometimes they'll join your team. Both lions and giants are noteworthy. So giants can take a lot of damage, but they don't really do a ton of damage. And lions, on the other hand, they can't take a lot of hits, but they hit really hard and really fast. So another downside to them is both of these unit types cannot be trained or healed. So they're kind of like one-time use things. So what they really excel at is they really excel at the championship, where you don't care if they gain stats or if they die because the game's going to be over. And they excel at sending them out in gauntlets. I mentioned how gauntlets will organize from strongest to weakest. I believe the gauntlets are also designed so that they will send out lions first, then giants, then your normal gladiators. But I could be off on that. I haven't done enough testing for that to be true. But in that case, you can send out the lions that are going to not be able to be trained or heal anyway. They'll usually die, but they'll take another gladiator with them and maybe a gladiator and a half. And that helps to keep your more permanent gladiators from getting trounced in a prolonged engagement. So we purchased our 4th gladiator. We're going to be taking them into the final regional here. We purchase our last bit of water. Take all 4 of our gladiators, send them in. And you can see Salvanius, even though we just purchased him, he's still pretty strong. Or Octavian, I guess it is. And our guys are going to chop that dude to bits pretty easily. And everybody's a winner, so they all get sweet stats. We even got a lion, Dorotheus, you can see it there. You can also pick up horses and carriages for chariot racing, but right now they're completely useless. We just literally sell them because they're money, and we definitely want money, but we don't want horses or carriages. So we're waiting for Aurelius to finish his strength training here. which is the white bar above his life bar. The coin shows that he's patroned. The triangle shows rank. We have now granted Aurelius freedom. That's going to make it so that he will join us during the rebellion part, which will be seen shortly. We now have 9 days left. Unfortunately, our days have stacked up in such a way that we're going to get one more battle prompt before we get days left. My mouse cursor is actually set on the post near the bottom right table, right in the place where reject fight would be. So I'm trying to optimize my ability to reject fights, because there's no keyboard hotkey for it. All right. And after this, I'm going to be loading up a video that's going to show the old route, and we'll kind of hop around a little bit inside of it so you can see how that one develops. So this is the championship fight. Our 3 guys and our lion are going to try to mop up. The lion's already down, but our guys are fighting strong here. Brutus drops down, leaving Sylvanius and Octavian, but between the 2 of them, they can chop up the rest of the guys, and they've actually done a ton of damage to the brute. Focus fire was rather poor in that fight, but our guys still managed to get a victory, which is nice. After the championship fight, we are into the rebellion, which you're going to see here. So all of the gladiators that I've granted freedom to, including Aurelius, are going to come to help us. We are now in control of Domina. Domina only has 50 HP and like no armor, so if she takes like any hit, she dies. So that's why we run to the side here and kind of cower in the corner. But Aurelius is just chopping everybody to bits here. Just fast and brutal fights. A little bit of suboptimal movement here. A couple of the guys got away and started to kind of like run around all over the place, and Aurelius had to chase them down, but we ended up picking them up. And that is Domina any % good ending right now. As I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and show a little bit of a video of a previous thing, which would more closely mimic something like All Victories, but I'm going to be jumping around that video, not holding onto it as much. But that's going to be it for this video. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just quickly look it up real quickly here on my other Domina runs. So I believe 57 was one of the better ones that I had. I guess I'm going to actually go to my channel. Sorry about this little, like, snafu here, but this is probably the best way I have in order to capture footage for this. I'm in a good ending. 1001. 5729. There you go. We're going to see a little bit of this. So this is going to start somewhat similarly. I'm going to put the sound on a little bit so you can hear a little bit of the music. You might get some background chatter from me and people on disc, though. For this, we used to pick up Architect, Faber, and Educator. Educator gives improvements to training, basic attack damage, and crit. We grab our 2 normal gladiators and grab them. Turn on automatic training, get humility going. We start getting Palace and gather stones. Again, this was back when we thought Palace increased training time. We still might get it to increase weapon training time, but for a different reason than I had picked it up originally in this video. We send in one of our good equipped strong gladiators. This is the first normal fight. I know that I can send in my weaker gladiator here since this guy's just a slave and has no...
with nothing on.
as I mentioned in the video, has nothing on whatsoever. So, I mean, that's free experience, basically, and free gold for Vigilius. Right here, we're sending wine in order to improve the disposition of the magistrate and the legate. If the legate and magistrate are angry with you, they will tend to put you in worse fights when they schedule you for a fight. So because of that, we have to pay more attention to that. So we're going to let this roll for a few minutes before we kind of skip forward in the video a little bit. But we're running Palace and Gatherstone. In the end of this, we're going to get 5 Palaces and 5 Gatherstones because we're going to have a large stable of gladiators. Here we're improving a little bit of our weapons and armors. We still will turn on auto upgrade, however, since the Fab are spending a lot of time making improvements, when a character is making improvements, they stop using their techniques, whether it's auto upgrade, improving stats of your gladiators randomly and such. So you kind of need to balance that out. So this guy is rather poorly equipped, so I can send in Vigilius again, and he'll kind of deal with this while getting a little stronger. The original route relied on kind of making your first 2 gladiators relatively strong together. The game tends to put you, like, base the strength on gladiators it should put against you based on your strongest gladiator. So, in general, you want to try to keep 2 to 3 gladiators relatively close in power for the way this route had originally worked out. Alright, so you can see the slaves are training other things besides strength. We really don't care about that, though. It would take time to kind of release them, and we want to release everybody kind of at the same time. If we're kind of releasing them here and there, then that would make it a little bit different to... Like, I guess you get more in the zone with menuing if you do it all at once, right? Good old Vigilius. So once again, not that strong a gear on this guy that we're opposing, so Vigilius gets sent in there to clean him up.
The slimiest of gladiators.
So we get Weapon Master there as a Jupiter Blessing. Weapon Master does 25% increased damage, so that's definitely something we want to throw on. Now at this point, because of what we fought with, Vigilius is probably our best gladiator. He also has the best gear. So we're going to main him from here on out, even though he didn't start as strong. That was a random event of a gladiator who got sunstroke. However, since we have more gladiators in this strategy, we're less susceptible to getting our good gladiators just destroyed. Whenever it says a gladiator has had a thing happen to them, it never tells you which one it is. So, like, you know, you always worry that it's like your best gladiator, but every once in a while it could just be some random dude just gets bit by a snake and dies. You just don't care.
Doing pretty good so far. Especially since Vigilius hasn't had to spend a lot of time healing, which is nice.
It's a nice point that I make inside of the video where time that you need to heal, like if you need to heal your gladiators, they stop training. So anytime that you have to heal is time spent not training. For that reason, in this route, once the Architect has done his job and gotten all the upgrades we need from him, we are going to drop the Architect and get the Medicus. The Medicus is basically a doctor that will heal gladiators automatically and improves healing times. So very, very strong. We're going to go ahead and jump ahead a little bit here. Let's see here. Let's see one of these fights. So I'm trying to find some places we can jump to. Again, I'm not trying to show a full run here for this,
How many
just
runs they had?
show little bits and pieces of where this route came from and where it could go for a marathon run that's maybe a little bit more action-packed, let's say.
How many runs do I have to reset? Quite a bit.
So this is a many v many, but
Fuck off with that gauntlet shit again.
yeah, that was a 5v5 gauntlet with a lion, like a
This is fucking
the Lion's Pit
right
modifier on it. So I just dropped that battle. I was like, I'm not taking that battle. So I only have 2 good gladiators, and yeah, it would not be great.
Swell. Iron out some things.
So here's an example of a Lion's Pit modifier.
Doesn't necessarily mean
And it's
that-
funny, Vigilius was actually doing really well in that fight, but he actually stopped to kill the lion and
just
then went
means
back to
that,
his original
like,
target.
I wouldn't beat my PB, so it's like, why continue? And it wouldn't even be close. So,
So we're going to go ahead and hop towards the mid-game here.
one of those.
So at this point, we're starting to buy some gladiators. You can see that we have a significant amount of palaces and gather stones. Near the end of this strategy, I was only running 5 stones and 5 palaces, but at this point, it looks like I was running 7 and 7.
Okay. So this
You can see me comparing the stats of my gladiator to the other gladiator, because the things you're looking for are their attack damage, their health, and if they have any good Jupiter blessings on themselves.
Okay, good job.
Because if they have some sick Jupiter blessings in an otherwise even fight, your guy could get completely mauled. So you want to pay attention to what they have access to and what you have access to. Obviously, less of a thing if you are forcing all victories on somebody. So, like, this is a event that's a flood that occurs, and the legate and the magistrate both ask if they can use your place as, like, a refuge. I chose the legate because I like having good
We
gladiators.
just gotta get people started. Like, these are not great gladiators.
Me mentioning that I'm conceding gladiator quality to some extent because I need to get them training and started. I also want to get them into regionals so that they can get stronger as well. I also need them as backups in case when we get the predetermined fights from the magistrate and the legate, if we get bad ones, we need to have extra bodies, at least on the field, that can take some hits. Ideally, they would take some hits but not die, and then be able to maybe get squired in as fully fledged, seasoned gladiators.
Sidorius 400.
So that was a slight mistake. I misread and thought it said 1v1 when it was actually 2v1 potential. So I could have sent in a second gladiator in there, but happens. I mentioned that there's a second glitch, so in addition to getting locked into walls, which is a way, way worse glitch, there's another glitch that can occur where you can hit the opponent, but not deal damage, but still cause blood spray. And that's actually a really powerful glitch. The reason for that is you will be awarded bonus coins, like a good amount of bonus coins based on the bloodshed in a battle. And if you get just huge gouts of blood and tons of extra blood inside of a fight, you could potentially get like 2,000 more coins. You know, like it's a lot of money that this glitch can occur with. That being said, you don't want to spend so much time in these fights that you actually are losing time during them. Because, like, if you get the glitch to occur, it can turn what should be, like, a 20 to 30 second fight into, like, a 2-minute fight. A 3-minute fight. You know, even more so. It just depends on how quickly you kill them and how much blood spray you get. To my knowledge, that bug hasn't been fully fixed, but it has occurred less often. I suppose another thing I could mention is there is a mode in this game called Brutal Mode. Brutal Mode is supposed to reduce the damage threshold of things to increase the length of battles. What I have found, though, is typically it makes the game easier as a result of our streamlined training methods. If I was to do a marathon run, I might even do it on brutal mode, just because it seems more consistent, like you wouldn't have to deal with your guys dying in random battles nearly as much. But I could definitely investigate that if there was some interest in the Domina speedrun. And I probably will investigate it a little bit before game selections are completed. Do a couple runs, let's say, of all victories brutal mode, or brutal mode with a couple of gladiators. Man, my phone is blowing up today. But yeah, we've now put the Medicus in, and he's starting to research things that will allow him to heal more effectively. We're going to be moving forward here.
So we're actually getting really good fights here.
So this is the 3v1 fight that occurred, where we actually are heavily favored in this random encounter, which is nice for kind of squiring one more of our gladiators. These can occur when you have good favor with the magistrate and the legate, and you just get a little bit of luck. Let's see, we got a lot of coin for that fight as well, over 1,000.
We might need to buy off.
But yeah, as you can see, like, our stable gets really large with this strategy, as opposed to the new streamlined version where we're only getting 1 to 2 gladiators for most of the run. Now, if you want to see what the championships look like in the late game, we're going to go ahead and show those real quick. So this is the championship. So of note in the championship, excuse me, when you have good standing with the legislate and the magistrate, the championship will actually have less gladiators opposing you, which is somewhat noteworthy. And I've thought about maybe trying to implement into the normal run of the game. Get a little bit of wine and make it so that you have less gladiators to fight at the end game. Yeah, you notice how fast our guys are also from this training. Then we're going to get to see the rebellion.
Yeah, I think it's like right here is okay, give or take. Okay.
So rebellion occurs. This time we have a couple of strong gladiators in Adius and Vigelius. You know, considerably quicker.
Good job.
But anyway, that's a quick look at Domina as a speedrun. As mentioned, we are going to be submitting any % good ending, and we will talk about potentially running maybe like all victories brutal mode, or maybe a brutal mode setting, anything like that. I think there's a lot of chance for marathon stuff for this game regarding Twitch integration. The question is how to proceed in a way that is interesting for the viewer to be able to view it. I think this game is fantastic as a spectator thing before we had the extremely minimalist approach, and I'm hoping that between me, Spy Crab, and another runner, Iziomash, that we can find some sort of way that this game can continue its hype train that it had when it first was released and we first started speedrunning it.
Good run.
But thank you for watching this submission video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed.
What's necessary.
See you another time.
Helping, like, I think, as I mentioned, I think improving my Medicus will help a lot better.